The warm, late summer breeze brushed against Alba's skin as she stepped off the train, her suitcase bumping gently along the platform behind her. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the town she had left behind years ago. It felt surreal to be back, as if time had stretched and shrunk simultaneously, weaving her past and present into an inseparable thread. Alba paused, letting her eyes sweep over the small station. It hadn't changed much, the same rusted benches, faded posters of town events, and the smell of freshly baked bread from the bakery across the street. She smiled faintly. This was the town where she had grown up, where every street held memories of laughter, heartache, and dreams that had once seemed so close. But now, the familiarity of it all was tinged with an unsettling feeling, as though it didn't quite fit her anymore. As she began her walk toward the town center, a flood of nostalgia washed over her. She passed the old cinema where she and her friends used to sneak in to see forbidden movies, the ice cream parlor where she had spent countless summer afternoons, and the park where she and Bruno used to meet after school. She hadn't spoken to Bruno in years, not since she left for the big city. She wondered if he still lived here, or if life had taken him elsewhere like it had for her. Alba's pace slowed as she approached the familiar cobblestone streets of the town square. The quaint shops were still in place, though some had been given fresh coats of paint. The bookstore, with its once peeling facade, now gleamed under a fresh layer of bright blue paint. She felt a tug in her chest as she passed it, her childhood sanctuary, a place where she had buried herself in stories when the world around her felt too small. Suddenly, a voice broke through her thoughts. "Alba? Is that really you?" She turned and saw Mrs. Pritchard, her old neighbor, standing in front of the flower shop. Her face lit up with the same warmth Alba remembered from her childhood, though now framed by streaks of silver in her hair. "Mrs. Pritchard!" Alba exclaimed, surprised by the wave of emotion that came with seeing a familiar face. The years melted away in an instant. She crossed the street and embraced the woman, whose floral-scented perfume brought back 100 memories of summer mornings when she would sneak into Mrs. Pritchard's garden to play with her cats. "It's been so long, dear. I wasn't sure if I'd ever see you back here," Mrs. Pritchard said, pulling back to look at Alba. "I wasn't sure either," Alba admitted, her smile faltering slightly. She had left this town with the hope of finding herself somewhere else, in a place where life moved faster, where her future didn't feel so predetermined. But now, back here, she wasn't so sure she had found what she was looking for. "Well, I'm glad you're back, even if it's just for a visit," Mrs. Pritchard said, patting her hand. "The town missed you." Alba forced a smile. The town missed her, maybe, but she wasn't sure if she missed it. She exchanged pleasantries with Mrs. Pritchard, promising to visit again before heading down the street to her parents' house. The winding road felt smaller now, the houses somehow more distant and yet too close, pressing in on her like the years of memories they held. When she reached the house, it was like stepping back in time. The small, two-story home with its ivy-covered walls and faded shutters stood exactly as she remembered it, a little worn but still full of character. Her mother had insisted on keeping the garden meticulously cared for, with roses blooming in the front yard and herbs spilling from pots along the windowsills. Alba stood at the gate for a moment, taking it all in. She could almost hear her younger self laughing, running barefoot through the grass, calling out for her parents, who were likely busy inside, preparing dinner or working on household tasks. Those days had felt endless, as though nothing would ever change, but everything had changed. As she opened the gate and walked up the path, her chest tightened. This vacation was supposed to be a break from the hectic pace of her life in the city, a chance to reconnect with herself. But being back here, with all these memories crowding in, she wasn't sure if this was the kind of peace she was looking for. Her mother greeted her at the door, arms wide open, her face glowing with the joy only a mother could have after seeing her child return home. The embrace was warm, but Alba felt a strange disconnection, as if the person her mother was holding wasn't entirely her anymore. "It's good to have you home, Alba," her mother whispered, holding her close. Home. The word echoed in Alba's mind, and she wondered if it still held the same meaning for her. Could she ever feel at home here again, after everything that had happened? Or was this just a reminder of a life she could never fully return to? As they stepped inside, the familiar smell of her mother's cooking filled the air, and for a brief moment, Alba allowed herself to relax. For now, at least, she could pretend that coming back was as simple as walking through the door. But deep down, she knew this homecoming would stir more than just memories. It would awaken the ghosts she had tried so hard to leave behind. The night hummed with excitement as Alba stood at the edge of the dance floor, watching the kaleidoscope of colors swirl beneath the dim lights. Music pulsed through the crowded house, vibrating through her chest, and laughter echoed from every corner. It felt good to be out, to be around people again. After days of settling back into her hometown, she was ready to let go, to forget for a while. The party had seemed like the perfect escape, a way to recapture the carefree spirit of her youth, if only for one night. Her best friend, Sophia, waved her over, a mischievous grin lighting up her face. "Come on, Alba, don't be a wallflower. Let's dance." Alba laughed, taking Sophia's hand and pulling her onto the dance floor. The music surged, and soon, Alba found herself lost in the rhythm, her body swaying to the beat as she let the energy of the room take over. For a while, it was easy to forget about the stresses that had weighed on her mind, easy to get swept up in the intoxicating joy of the moment. She and Sophia twirled and laughed, their movements growing wilder with each song. Around them, the party buzzed with life, people danced, drinks flowed, and the night seemed endless. As the hours wore on, Alba stepped outside to catch her breath. The air was cool against her warm skin, the distant sound of music still echoing from inside. She leaned against the porch railing, closing her eyes and smiling to herself. It was one of those rare nights where everything felt simple, almost like she had never left town. It was nice to pretend, even if just for a little while. "Hey, you're Alba, right?" a voice interrupted her thoughts. She opened her eyes to find a group of boys standing nearby, their eyes gleaming with too much drink and bravado. Alba tensed slightly but forced a polite smile. "Yeah, that's me. Bruno's friend, right?" One of the boys stepped closer, his grin a little too wide. His voice had that slurred edge that came with too many beers, his confidence buoyed by the pack of friends gathered behind him. "Yeah, Bruno and I grew up together," Alba said, trying to keep her tone light. She glanced toward the house, Wondering if Sophia was still inside, the boy leaned against the railing beside her, his eyes drifting over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "You look different now. Even better than I remember." Alba shifted uncomfortably. She wasn't sure if it was the drink or just the way he stared at her, but something about the interaction felt wrong. "Thanks," she muttered, inching away slightly. "I should head back inside." Before she could take a step, another boy blocked her path. He was taller, his expression more predatory. "Where you going? The night's just getting started." His tone was playful, but there was an underlying menace that made her stomach twist. "I'm just going to find my friend," Alba said, trying to keep her voice steady, but her pulse quickened. The group circled her like vultures now, their laughter dark and heavy. One of them reached out and tugged playfully at a strand of her hair, making her flinch. Another boy leaned in closer, his breath hot against her ear. "Stay a little longer, Alba. We're just having fun." Panic rose in her chest as she realized how trapped she was. There was no easy escape, no friendly face in sight. Her instincts screamed at her to run, but her feet felt rooted to the spot, paralyzed by the sudden shift in the atmosphere. The carefree joy of the night had evaporated, replaced by a cold, predatory tension. "I said, I need to go," Alba repeated, more firmly this time, but her voice was shaking. The boys exchanged glances, smirking, as though they found her fear amusing. "Come on, we're just being friendly," one of them said, his hand reaching out to touch her arm. Alba jerked away, heart hammering in her chest. "Don't touch me," she snapped, stepping backward, but it only seemed to fuel their sick amusement. One of the boys grabbed her wrist, and a rush of adrenaline surged through her. She yanked her arm free, her mind spinning. She needed to get away. Now, just as she was about to push past them, another boy blocked her escape, leaning in close, his eyes gleaming with a cruel kind of delight. "Where do you think you're going?" His hand slid up her arm, and Alba froze, her body locked in place by fear and disbelief. This couldn't be happening, not here, not to her. Her mind screamed at her to fight, to push him away, but everything felt like it was happening in slow motion. The boy's laughter echoed in her ears, growing louder and more distorted. The world around her started to blur, her heart pounding so hard she could hardly breathe, and then, without warning, a bright flash of light hit her eyes, blinding her momentarily. Someone had opened the door to the house, and the sudden burst of light and noise shattered the moment. "Alba!" Sophia's voice called from the doorway, breaking through the haze. The boys stepped back, their expressions quickly shifting to innocence as Sophia hurried over, wrapping her arm around Alba protectively. "Are you okay?" she asked, her eyes flicking suspiciously toward the group of boys. Alba nodded shakily, her voice caught in her throat. She didn't want to make a scene, didn't want to escalate what had just happened. Yeah, I'm fine." But she wasn't fine. The pit in her stomach remained, and the cool night air felt suffocating now. She let Sophia guide her back into the house, away from the boys' lingering stares. Inside, the party continued as though nothing had happened, but Alba's mind was miles away. She barely heard the music, barely registered the laughter. All she could think about was the way they had looked at her, the way their hands had felt on her skin, she took a deep breath, trying to calm herself, but the night had already shifted. What had started as a celebration had morphed into a nightmare she couldn't quite shake, and the worst part was, deep down, Alba knew this wasn't over yet. The sound of waves crashing against the shore pulled Alba from the depths of unconsciousness. She blinked, the sunlight stinging her eyes as she struggled to make sense of where she was. Sand clung to her skin, gritty beneath her fingers, and the taste of salt hung on her lips. Her head pounded, the dull ache making it hard to think straight. Slowly, she sat up, her body protesting with every movement. The beach stretched out before her in every direction, deserted and eerily quiet. Alba's clothes were still on, though disheveled, her shoes missing. A chill ran down her spine, but not because of the ocean breeze. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to shake the feeling that something was very wrong. She couldn't remember how she had gotten here. The last thing she recalled was leaving the party with Sophia, or had she? Her mind was foggy, and every attempt to piece together the events of the night before felt like chasing shadows. Fragments of laughter, music, and faces danced on the edge of her memory, but they were disjointed, slipping away the moment she tried to focus on them. Her eyes scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of familiarity, but the beach seemed foreign, almost haunting in its emptiness. Panic gnawed at her insides. What had happened? Why was she here? Alba's hands shook as she brushed sand off her arms. She noticed the soreness in her muscles, a heaviness that made her feel as though she had run for miles. But there were no answers, just the rhythmic pounding of the waves and the lingering taste of fear at the back of her throat. She forced herself to stand, wobbling slightly as her legs protested. Her dress, the same one she'd worn to the party, was crumpled and damp with seawater. She glanced around, trying to remember if anyone had been with her, but the beach remained silent, and then, flashes of the night came rushing back in fragmented pieces. The party. Laughter. Dancing with Sophia. The boys, those boys, her breath caught in her throat. The boys had surrounded her outside the house, their words growing darker, their hands bolder. She had tried to leave, tried to push them away, but, then what? What had happened after Sophia found her? She remembered walking back into the house, feeling shaken but safe in Sophia's presence. But there was a blank space after that, no memory of leaving, no memory of coming to the beach. Her heart raced as she bent down to search for her phone in her pockets. Nothing. She felt a surge of desperation as she scanned the shore for any sign of her belongings. A short distance away, she spotted her purse lying half buried in the sand. Alba scrambled toward it, her fingers shaking as she fumbled with the zipper. Her phone was still there, though the screen was cracked. She unlocked it, blinking against the glare of the sun as she checked the time. That it was almost noon. She had been here for hours. But how? And why? Her mind raced, and the more she tried to piece the night together, the more elusive it became. There was a gaping hole in her memory that she couldn't fill, and the harder she pushed to remember, the more that gnawing fear twisted in her gut. Alba's breath hitched as a wave of nausea washed over her. She stumbled toward the water's edge, the cool spray of the ocean hitting her ankles as she tried to steady herself. The sickening realization hit her: something had happened last night, something that her mind wasn't ready to confront. Tears stung her eyes as she sank to her knees, the waves gently lapping at her legs. She hugged herself, trying to ward off the cold feeling spreading through her. Why couldn't she remember? What had they done? She shuddered, the vague memories of the boy's predatory grins and hands on her skin sending her heart racing. She tried to push it away, to focus on something, anything else, but the memories wouldn't let go. As she stared out at the vast, empty ocean, Alba felt a strange sense of isolation. This beach, once a place of peace and childhood memories, now felt like a prison. She didn't want to be here, didn't want to feel this way. She needed answers, but none came. With shaking hands, she opened her phone again and scrolled through her messages, hoping for a clue, a message from Sophia, something that could explain what had happened. There was nothing. No missed calls, no texts, no breadcrumbs to lead her back to the truth, but then she noticed a notification, several, actually, of calls and texts from Bruno. Her heart skipped. Bruno. Why was he calling her? Had something happened? She hesitated for a moment before pressing the call button. The phone rang twice before Bruno picked up. Alba. Where are you? Bruno's voice was sharp, concerned. I don't know, she stammered, glancing around the empty beach. I woke up on the beach. I don't remember how I got here. Alba, listen to me. His voice softened, though the urgency remained. We've been looking for you all morning. Sophia said you left the party early. Are you okay? Did something happen? Her mind raced, torn between the fear of telling him and the need to understand. I don't know. Something happened last night, Bruno. I don't remember everything. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, the weight of his silence pressing down on her. When he finally spoke, his voice was strained. I'm coming to get you. Stay where you are. The call ended, and Alba stood there, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. She wasn't sure how she felt, relief, dread, confusion. It was all a blur. The only thing she knew for certain was that this nightmare wasn't over. As the waves crashed against the shore, Alba closed her eyes, bracing herself for whatever truth would come next. Whatever had happened last night was just the beginning. A year earlier, the small town that had once felt like home had begun to suffocate Alba. The familiar streets, the predictable faces, the routine of it all had weighed on her like an anchor she couldn't escape. Every day had blurred into the next, leaving her restless, craving something more. She had spent years watching her friends grow into their lives, settle into relationships, and embrace the same rhythm she found unbearable. And for a long time, she had convinced herself she could do the same, until the day she realized she couldn't anymore. The decision to leave hadn't been easy, but it had been inevitable. She stood in her childhood bedroom one last time, surrounded by packed boxes and the fading memories of her past. The walls, once decorated with posters and photos of her high school years, were now bare, stripped of the identity she had once held dear. She traced her fingers over the windowsill, where she had spent countless nights dreaming of what lay beyond the borders of her small town. Now, those dreams were about to become reality. Her parents had been supportive, if a little hesitant. "Are you sure you want to leave?" her mother had asked, concern etched across her face. "The city is so different, that's exactly why I'm going, Mom," Alba had replied with a determined smile. "I need a change. I need something new." The truth was, she was tired of being the same person in the same place, living a life that felt like it wasn't hers anymore. The big city promised excitement, anonymity, and most importantly, a fresh start. Alba glanced out the window at the familiar street below. Her old neighbor, Mrs. Lopez, was tending to her garden, just as she did every morning. Across the road, the Vargas family's dog barked at a passing car, just like clockwork. It was the same scene she had witnessed for years, yet today it felt different. Today, it felt like goodbye. The weight of her decision settled in her chest as she grabbed her suitcase and headed for the door. Leaving wasn't just about the town, it was about shedding the skin of her old life, the version of herself that no longer fit. She was ready to step into something unknown, even if it scared her a little. Her best friend Sophia had come to say goodbye. They stood on the porch, exchanging promises to stay in touch, even though they both knew things would never be quite the same. "You'll love it in the city," Sophia had said with a smile, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You've always been meant for something bigger." Alba smiled back, feeling a lump rise in her throat. "I hope so." As the bus pulled away from her hometown, Alba stared out the window, watching the familiar sights disappear behind her. Her heart pounded with a mix of excitement and fear. She had never lived anywhere else, never been away from the safety of the life she had always known. But that was the point, wasn't it? To challenge herself, to discover who she really was when she wasn't bound by the expectations of her past. The city loomed ahead like a sprawling maze of possibilities. It was everything her town wasn't: fast-paced, diverse, full of life at every turn. The towering skyscrapers, the noise, the endless streams of people, it was overwhelming and exhilarating at the same time. Alba had always imagined what it would be like to live in a place where no one knew her, where she could be anyone she wanted to be. Now that she was here, it felt both liberating and terrifying. She rented a small apartment in a bustling neighborhood, far from the quiet of her hometown. The streets were always alive with the sounds of car horns, chatter, and the hum of city life. At first, it was hard to adjust to the constant motion, the anonymity of the crowds. She missed the familiarity of knowing everyone's name, of waving to neighbors and being greeted with smiles, but slowly, the city began to work its magic on her. She found a job at a local cafe, where she met people from all walks of life. Each day brought new faces, new conversations, and a sense of freedom that she had never experienced before. For the first time in her life, she wasn't defined by her past, by the person everyone expected her to be. She could reinvent herself with each passing day, and no one would question it. And then, in the most unexpected way, Bruno came back into her life. She hadn't seen him in years, not since they were teenagers growing up across the street from one another. He had been the boy next door, the one she had shared countless childhood memories with, riding bikes, climbing trees, playing in the street until the sun set. But as they grew older, their paths had diverged. Bruno had moved away for school, and Alba had stayed behind, their lives taking separate courses, running into him in a city of 4 million people had felt like fate. It had been a random afternoon, just another day in the city, when she saw him standing at a street corner, waiting for the light to change. For a moment, she had doubted her own eyes. Could it really be him? Bruno, she had called, unsure if he would even recognize her. He had turned, his face breaking into a wide smile as soon as he saw her. Alba? No way. From that moment, it was as though no time had passed. They fell into an easy rhythm, like old friends picking up where they left off. Except now, there was something more, a new energy, a connection that hadn't been there before. In the city, they weren't just childhood friends anymore. There was a spark between them that Alba couldn't ignore. They started spending more time together, exploring the city, sharing their hopes and dreams. Bruno was different from the boy she remembered. He had grown into someone confident, ambitious, and full of life. He had stories of his own to tell, experiences that had shaped him in ways she hadn't expected, and slowly, what had begun as friendship blossomed into something deeper. Alba found herself falling in love with Bruno, in a way that felt inevitable, like the city had conspired to bring them together. The connection was easy, natural, like it was always meant to happen this way. With him, everything felt possible. The city, once intimidating and vast, now felt smaller, warmer, with Bruno by her side. But as much as she embraced the new life she was building, Alba knew there were parts of her past she couldn't escape. The weight of her small-town roots, the memories she had left behind, and the fear that something would eventually catch up to her lingered in the back of her mind. She had fled to the city to start over, but she hadn't yet reckoned with everything she had left behind. And even as she reveled in her newfound freedom, Alba couldn't shake the feeling that her past would one day come back to haunt her. For now, though, she had Bruno, and the city was hers to explore. It felt like a new beginning, a chance to rewrite her story. If only she knew what was waiting on the horizon. In a city as vast and chaotic as this one, Alba never expected to cross paths with anyone from her past. The millions of faces that rushed past her each day were just that, faces, strangers in a sea of anonymity. And that was what she had craved when she left her small hometown behind. Here, she could be whoever she wanted, disconnected from the person she used to be. It was a fresh start, an escape from the predictable and the familiar. But then, on a perfectly ordinary afternoon, she saw him. Alba had been on her way to the grocery store, weaving through the crowded streets as she did every day, when a face in the distance caught her attention. She stopped in her tracks, squinting through the bustle of the sidewalk, her heart skipping a beat. For a moment, she thought she was imagining things. It couldn't be him, what were the odds? But as the crowd shifted and parted, the face came into sharper focus, and there was no mistaking it. Bruno. She hadn't seen him in years, not since he moved away for college. They had grown up just across the street from each other, shared countless childhood memories, but after he left, they lost touch. Alba never imagined she would see him again, especially not here, in the middle of this sprawling city. Her feet moved before she could think. "Bruno?" she called out, her voice shaky with disbelief. He turned at the sound of his name, scanning the crowd before his eyes landed on her. And just like that, his expression lit up with recognition. A smile broke across his face, wide and warm, the kind of smile that transported her back to summer days spent riding bikes and playing in the street. "Alba," he said, his voice filled with the same astonishment she felt. "No way. Is that really you?" She nodded, her own smile breaking through as she walked toward him, her heart pounding in her chest. "It's me," she said, still trying to process the moment. "What are you doing here?" Bruno laughed, the sound easy and familiar, just like she remembered. "I live here now. I moved to the city a few years ago for work. What about you?" "I had no idea you were here. I just moved here last year," Alba explained, her mind spinning with the sheer improbability of this encounter. "I needed a change, so I packed up and left the old town behind." "Well, it looks like the city has a way of bringing old friends back together," Bruno said with a grin, his eyes sparkling. "This is crazy. We have to catch up." Before Alba knew it, they were sitting at a nearby cafe, sipping coffee and talking like no time had passed. It was surreal, seeing Bruno here, in this massive city, felt like a twist of fate. They shared stories of their lives since they last saw each other, laughing about the old days and marveling at how much had changed. Alba couldn't stop smiling. The familiarity of Bruno's presence, the way he still knew how to make her laugh, felt comforting in a way she hadn't expected. The years apart had changed them both, but somehow, they had slipped back into their easy rhythm as though no time had passed. Bruno had always been the boy next door, the one she could count on to join her for an impromptu adventure or a late-night conversation on the porch. Growing up, they had been inseparable, sharing everything from inside jokes to childhood secrets. But as they grew older, their lives took different directions, and they had drifted apart. She had never forgotten about him, though. Every now and then, she would think about what he was doing, where he had ended up, and now, here he was, right in front of her, as though the universe had decided to reunite them. As the afternoon wore on, their conversation deepened. Bruno told her about his job in marketing, how he had found his way to the city after a string of different career paths. He spoke with passion about his work, but Alba could sense that same restless energy she had felt before she left their hometown, the need for something more, something bigger. "What about you?" Bruno asked, his gaze warm and curious. "What brought you here?" Alba paused, thinking about how much she had wanted to escape her old life. "I needed a fresh start," she said simply. "I felt like I was stuck in the same routine, the same place, with no room to grow. The city seemed like the best place to find something new." Bruno nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I get that. It's funny, isn't it? We both ended up here, looking for something." There was a pause, a moment where the conversation hung in the air, and Alba felt the weight of it. There was something unspoken between them, a shift in the dynamic that hadn't been there before. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but there was a new energy, something deeper than the friendship they had once shared. "Remember when we used to talk about running away?" Bruno asked suddenly, his voice full of nostalgia. "We'd sit on your porch and plan out our escape routes, where we'd go, what we'd do once we got out of that town." Alba laughed softly. "Yeah, I remember. We were so desperate to leave, weren't we? We were, Bruno agreed, his gaze holding hers for a beat longer than necessary. And now here we are, actually living it. For a moment, they both fell silent, the weight of their shared past settling between them. Alba felt a flicker of something she hadn't expected, something more than just friendship. She couldn't quite define it, but the way Bruno looked at her, the way his smile softened when he spoke to her, made her heart race just a little faster. It was a strange, magical feeling, this unexpected reunion with someone she thought she had left behind. And yet, it felt like they had been meant to find each other again, like the city had conspired to bring them back into each other's lives. As they left the cafe, Bruno turned to her with a grin. "You know, we should do this again sometime. Catch up properly." Alba smiled back, her heart light. "I'd like that." They exchanged numbers, promising to stay in touch, but Alba knew deep down that this was more than just a casual promise. Something had reignited between them, something that went beyond their childhood memories. It was as though their connection had been waiting, dormant, until now. As she walked back to her apartment, Alba couldn't shake the feeling that this reunion had been more than a coincidence. Meeting Bruno again in a city of millions felt like fate, a magical, improbable moment that had brought a piece of her past into her new life, and as she thought about their next meeting, her heart fluttered with the possibilities of what might come next. Alba had never imagined that her reunion with Bruno would lead to something more than rekindling an old friendship. Yet, as the weeks passed, she found herself drawn to him in ways she hadn't anticipated. What had once been a childhood connection was now evolving into something deeper, something intoxicating. With each day, their bond grew stronger, and Alba felt herself falling for Bruno, falling into the warmth of his presence and the ease of their companionship. They spent their evenings exploring the city together, discovering hidden cafes, strolling through parks, and sharing stories about their lives. Bruno had a way of making everything feel like an adventure, even the simplest of moments. His enthusiasm was infectious, and Alba found herself laughing more than she had in years. "How is it possible that we never saw this coming back in the day?" Alba asked one night, as they sat on a bench in a quiet corner of the city park, their hands intertwined. Bruno grinned, his eyes twinkling in the soft glow of the streetlights. "We were kids back then. Maybe we weren't ready for it. Or maybe it was always meant to happen like this." Alba smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. Being with Bruno felt right. It was effortless, like they had slipped into a rhythm they were always meant to find. And for the first time in a long time, Alba felt truly at peace. As their relationship blossomed, Alba marveled at the unexpected joy Bruno brought into her life. He was attentive, kind, and always knew how to make her feel cherished. It was in the little things, the way he would text her good morning every day without fail, the way he remembered her favorite coffee order, or the way he listened intently whenever she spoke, as if every word mattered. They were building something real, something stable. And after the unpredictability of her past, the stability Bruno offered was something Alba hadn't realized she craved. He made her feel safe, loved, and, most importantly, seen. Their weekends were spent venturing outside the city limits, exploring nearby towns or hiking trails. Bruno loved the outdoors, and he shared that love with Alba, coaxing her out of her comfort zone and into new experiences. On one particularly sunny Saturday, they packed a picnic and drove to a lake just outside the city. The day was perfect, clear skies, gentle breezes, and the calm of nature surrounding them. As they sat by the water, Alba watching the gentle ripples on the lake's surface, she couldn't help but think about how far she had come since leaving her hometown. The uncertainty, the fear of starting over, had all melted away, replaced by this sense of belonging. Bruno was a big part of that. "This feels like a dream," Alba said, her voice soft as she looked out over the water. Bruno turned to her, his expression tender. "If it is, I don't ever want to wake up." He reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. Alba smiled, feeling a surge of warmth as she looked into his eyes. The connection between them was undeniable, a magnetic pull that made her feel like they were always meant to find each other again. In those moments, Alba allowed herself to believe in the magic of it all, the improbability of their reunion, the ease with which they had fallen into a relationship, the joy that Bruno had brought into her life. It was as though the universe had aligned just for them, creating a path that led them back to each other. But as the relationship deepened, Alba also found a sense of stability that went beyond the excitement of new love. Bruno wasn't just her partner in adventure, he was also her anchor. Whenever doubts crept into her mind or the weight of the past threatened to pull her down, Bruno was there, steady and unwavering. He had a way of calming her, of reassuring her that everything would be okay. And for someone who had always been so fiercely independent, it was a relief to have someone she could lean on, someone who could share the burdens and the joys equally. Their love wasn't just a whirlwind romance, it was something real, something grounded. Alba found herself thinking about the future in ways she hadn't before. With Bruno, everything felt possible. He had given her the courage to dream again, to believe in the idea of forever. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, Alba returned to her apartment to find Bruno waiting for her with dinner. He had cooked her favorite meal, lighting candles and setting the table with a simple, elegant charm that made her heart swell. "You didn't have to do all this," Alba said, feeling the weight of the day slip away as she took in the scene. "I wanted to," Bruno replied, smiling as he pulled out a chair for her. "You've had a long day. You deserve to relax." As they sat down to eat, Alba couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by how lucky she was. She had found someone who cared for her in ways she hadn't known she needed, someone who made every day better just by being there. "You're too good to me," Alba said, her voice soft as she reached across the table to take his hand. Bruno smiled, his gaze warm and steady. "I'm just doing what feels right." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the flickering candlelight casting soft shadows around the room. It was in these quiet moments that Alba realized just how much Bruno had become a part of her life. He wasn't just her boyfriend, he was her partner, her confidant, her safe place. As the night drew to a close, Alba found herself thinking about how far they had come. In such a short time, Bruno had brought so much joy, love, and stability into her life. He had helped her heal in ways she hadn't realized she needed, showing her that it was okay to trust, to open her heart again. But as they curled up on the couch together, Alba couldn't shake the feeling that her happiness was fragile. The trauma of that night still lingered in the back of her mind, a shadow that threatened to eclipse the light Bruno had brought into her life. For now, though, Alba allowed herself to stay in the moment. She rested her head on Bruno's chest, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing, and let the warmth of his presence surround her. In this space, everything felt perfect. And for the first time in a long time, Alba believed that maybe, just maybe, she could have the happy ending she had always dreamed of. As the months passed, Alba and Bruno's love grew into something that transcended the excitement of new romance. What began as a rekindled friendship had blossomed into an unshakable connection, a bond that felt deeper than words could express. They were no longer just two people navigating a relationship, they were partners, each other's confidant and safe haven in a world that often felt chaotic and uncertain. In the bustling city, where life moved at an overwhelming pace, Bruno became Alba's anchor. He grounded her in ways she hadn't thought possible. His presence was steady, reassuring, whether they were caught in the rush of the city's constant motion or enjoying quiet moments at home. Bruno had a calm about him that made Alba feel as if everything would always be okay, even when the world seemed to swirl around them. Every day with Bruno brought new discoveries, new reasons for Alba to fall deeper in love. He was patient and kind, thoughtful in the little gestures that made Alba's heart swell. From leaving her favorite tea on the counter when she woke up in the mornings to slipping a handwritten note into her bag just to brighten her day, Bruno had a way of making her feel cherished. Alba marveled at how natural it all felt, how their lives seemed to merge effortlessly. They spent their weekdays wrapped up in the city's frenetic energy, pursuing their own careers and dreams, only to return to each other at the end of the day. Their evenings were spent sharing stories, cooking meals together, and talking about everything from their favorite childhood memories to their hopes for the future. Bruno had become more than just a lover, he was her best friend. "I feel like I've known you my whole life," Alba said one evening as they sat on the balcony of her apartment, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. Bruno smiled, his hand resting over hers. "Maybe you have. We just needed the right timing." That's how it felt, like everything had led them to this point. They had lived separate lives for so long, crossing paths occasionally in their hometown but never knowing the love that awaited them. And now, in this city of millions, they had found each other again. Alba often marveled at the improbability of it all, the magic of their reunion in such a vast place. But instead of questioning it, she embraced it, letting the love they shared fill the empty spaces in her life she hadn't even known were there. As their relationship deepened, so did their trust in one another. Bruno had a way of seeing Alba, really seeing her, beyond the walls she sometimes put up. He understood her, not just the version she showed the world but the parts of her she kept hidden, the fears, the doubts, the memories that haunted her from time to time. She hadn't opened up about that night yet, the night she woke up disoriented on the beach. It was a wound too fresh, too raw, but Bruno's patience made her feel safe. She knew that when she was ready, he would be there, without judgment, without pushing her to share more than she could handle. That security allowed Alba to heal in her own time, knowing that she didn't have to face her demons alone. Bruno, too, had his vulnerabilities, and he trusted Alba with them. He spoke of his dreams, his insecurities, the pressures he sometimes felt to succeed in the city. They built each other up, strengthening the foundation of their relationship with every conversation, every quiet moment shared between them. Their love wasn't perfect, no relationship ever was. They had their disagreements, their moments of frustration or miscommunication, but those moments only served to bring them closer. Every time they faced a challenge, they came out stronger on the other side, more in tune with each other's needs and desires. Alba found solace in the predictability of Bruno's love. It wasn't marked by grand gestures or fiery passion. Instead, it was a constant, a quiet force that carried them through the ups and downs of life in the city. She had come to rely on him, not in a way that diminished her independence, but in a way that made her feel like part of something bigger, something meaningful. They talked about the future often, about what they wanted their lives to look like in 5, 10, or even 20 years. It was during these conversations that Alba realized just how deeply Bruno had become intertwined in her vision of the life she wanted to build. With him, she could see a home filled with love and laughter, a life where they would continue to support and grow with one another. The idea of forever didn't scare her anymore. It excited her. One night, as they lay in bed, Alba turned to Bruno and whispered, "I've never loved anyone the way I love you." Bruno smiled softly, pulling her closer. "I feel the same. It's like we found something that was always meant to be." Their love had become a source of strength for Alba. It wasn't just about the romance, it was about the partnership, the unwavering support they gave each other. In a city that could be harsh and unforgiving, their relationship was a sanctuary, a place where Alba could let down her guard and just be herself. As they continued to navigate life together, Alba felt like nothing could come between them. Bruno had become her rock, her safe place in the midst of the chaos. And for the first time in a long time, Alba felt like she had truly found a home, not in a city or a place, but in the love they shared. Their love was beyond words. It was felt in the silences between them, in the knowing looks, in the gentle touches that said more than any words ever could. It was a love that had grown quietly, steadily, and now it was something unbreakable, something Alba knew she could hold on to no matter what challenges lay ahead. Alba had thought she could keep the past buried, that the love she shared with Bruno could overshadow the dark memories that lingered in the recesses of her mind. But the trauma of that night, the night at the beach, had never truly left her. It haunted her in ways she couldn't fully understand, creeping into her thoughts when she least expected it. At first, the memories came in fragments, mere flashes of sensations, a loud laugh, the coldness of the night air against her skin, the taste of salt in her mouth. But these glimpses were fleeting, vanishing as quickly as they appeared. She would shake her head, trying to push them away, convincing herself that it was just her mind playing tricks on her. But as her relationship with Bruno deepened, the memories started resurfacing more frequently, like pieces of a puzzle she couldn't put together. She would wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, drenched in sweat, unable to shake the feeling that something terrible had happened. Sometimes, it was as if she could hear the echo of distant voices, taunting and cruel, but when she tried to focus on them, they dissolved into nothingness. The party had started innocently enough. Alba had been excited to see old friends, to let loose and enjoy the familiar comfort of her hometown. It was supposed to be a carefree night of celebration, a time to relive the nostalgia of her younger years. But at some point, things had taken a dark turn. The memories from that night were shrouded in confusion. She remembered dancing, the warmth of alcohol spreading through her veins, the music vibrating through her body. But after that, everything became a blur. Faces merged together, the voices around her growing louder and more distorted. She remembered feeling uncomfortable, a sense of unease creeping into her, but she couldn't pinpoint why. Alba had tried to move on, to put it all behind her, but the nagging sensation that something awful had occurred wouldn't go away. And now, strange, fragmented memories were beginning to surface, each one more disturbing than the last. One night, as she and Bruno were sitting on the couch, watching a movie, she found herself drifting off into her thoughts. The room was dark except for the flickering light of the television, and the sound of the film faded into the background as a sudden image flashed through her mind, a hand gripping her wrist, tight and unrelenting. Alba gasped, jolting upright, her heart racing. Bruno immediately turned to her, concern etched on his face. "Alba, are you okay?" She nodded quickly, forcing a smile, though her mind was still reeling. "Yeah, sorry. I just zoned out for a second." But she wasn't okay. She was unraveling. The more she tried to push the memories away, the more forcefully they seemed to resurface. Over the next few days, the flashes became more vivid. Alba could see faces now, blurred, shadowy figures surrounding her, their voices like distant echoes in her mind. There was laughter, but it wasn't the joyful kind. It was mocking, filled with malice. She could feel her body freezing up, her mind shutting down as fear took over. The night that had once been a hazy memory was slowly sharpening into focus, and with each new fragment, a chilling realization began to dawn on her. Something terrible had happened at that party, something far worse than she had allowed herself to believe. Alba started avoiding social gatherings, retreating into herself as the memories threatened to consume her. Bruno noticed the change in her, but she couldn't bring herself to tell him. How could she explain something she didn't fully understand herself? The guilt weighed heavily on her. She knew she should talk to him, open up about the nightmares, the flashes of memory that were becoming harder to ignore. But every time she tried, the words caught in her throat, and she convinced herself that it would pass, that if she just pushed it down deep enough, it would eventually disappear. But it didn't. One night, as she lay in bed, the pieces of the puzzle finally began to fit together. The memories flooded her mind, overwhelming her with their intensity. She could see it clearly now, the party, the laughter, the way the boys had cornered her when she tried to leave. She remembered their hands on her, pulling her back as she struggled, the way her body had gone numb, her mind detaching from the horror unfolding around her. And then, the most terrifying image of all, the face of one of the boys. He wasn't just anyone. He was someone she knew, someone who had been a part of her life for years. Bruno's friends. The realization hit her like a wave, knocking the breath out of her. 3 of the boys who had assaulted her that night were Bruno's best friends. The ones she had met before, laughed with, shared dinners with. The same faces that had smiled at her across the table now haunted her nightmares. Alba sat up in bed, her heart pounding in her chest, her hands trembling. How could this be real? How could the people she had trusted have done something so vile? She wanted to scream, to cry, but no sound came out. The room felt like it was closing in on her, the weight of the truth suffocating her. And then, in the midst of her panic, another image surfaced. A 4th boy. His face was obscured, but there was something familiar about him, something that sent a chill down her spine. As the memory of that fourth attacker slowly took shape, a horrifying thought crept into her mind: there was still more to uncover, the nightmare wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Alba's world shattered that night, and she knew that from this moment on, nothing would ever be the same. The shock of her realization hung over Alba like a thick fog, suffocating her every thought. Her mind raced with questions, each one more unbearable than the last. How could it be possible? How could Bruno's closest friends, the ones who had shared laughter, conversations, and meals with her, be the same boys responsible for the worst night of her life? The betrayal cut deep, twisting her insides with every passing moment. She had spent the past year trying to move forward, to push that horrifying night out of her mind. But now, the fragmented memories had started to piece themselves together, and the truth that emerged was far worse than anything she could have imagined. She remembered the feeling of their hands on her, the sickening laughter that echoed in her ears. The more she let the memories resurface, the clearer it became. Faces that had once been blurred were now sharp, familiar, and undeniably tied to Bruno. The boys who had harassed her, violated her, weren't strangers. They were people she had trusted, people who had been part of her new life with Bruno. Alba felt nauseous as the full weight of the revelation settled in. How could she look Bruno in the eye, knowing that the men he called friends had assaulted her? Worse, how could she tell him? Would he even believe her? The thought of Bruno defending them, dismissing her trauma as a misunderstanding, was too much to bear. For days, Alba kept her distance from Bruno, her mind churning with fear and confusion. She didn't know how to face him, how to explain that the people he cared about were the same ones who had left her broken on that beach. She went through the motions, trying to act normal, but inside, her emotions were unraveling. The memories became more vivid with each passing day, as if her brain was finally allowing her to see the full scope of what had happened. It wasn't just the faces that haunted her now, it was the details. The smirks on their lips, the mocking way they had spoken to her, the feeling of helplessness as her body had betrayed her, refusing to fight back when she needed it most. Alba spent sleepless nights pacing her apartment, replaying every interaction she had ever had with Bruno's friends. They had seemed so normal, so friendly. She couldn't believe how well they had hidden the darkness lurking inside them. How had she not seen it? How had she allowed herself to trust them? The need to uncover the full truth consumed her. She started piecing together every fragment of memory, revisiting the events of that night with a renewed sense of purpose. Her mind, which had once been clouded by alcohol and fear, was now sharp, driven by a need for justice. She remembered the party, the loud music, the dim lights, the way the boys had circled around her when she tried to leave. At first, she had brushed off their advances as harmless flirting, but their behavior had quickly turned predatory. She had tried to walk away, but they had followed her, trapping her in a corner with no way out. The night felt endless, a blur of terror and confusion. She couldn't remember how she had ended up on the beach, fully clothed but with the sickening feeling that something terrible had happened. She had woken up alone, the sun rising on the horizon, her body sore and her mind shattered. Now, as she pieced together the details, Alba felt a burning need for answers. She couldn't keep this to herself any longer. She needed to know if Bruno knew, if he had any idea what his friends had done. The thought of confronting him terrified her, but she knew she couldn't hide the truth forever. One evening, Alba decided to take the first step. She sat down with her phone, scrolling through Bruno's social media, trying to find any connection to that night. As she clicked through photos of his friends, the faces that haunted her nightmares stared back at her, grinning and carefree. There was Daniel, the loud and charismatic one, always the center of attention at every gathering. He had been the ringleader that night, egging the others on with his cruel laughter. Then there was Miguel, the quiet one who had always seemed kind and gentle, until that night, when he had shown a darker side. And finally, Lucas, Bruno's oldest friend, the one who had always seemed protective of Alba, until his true nature had revealed itself in the shadows. The more Alba dug, the more the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. It was them. She had no doubt now. The boys who had been Bruno's closest companions were the same ones who had shattered her world. The weight of the truth pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She couldn't hold this in any longer. She had to confront Bruno, no matter how terrifying the thought was. The next day, Alba found herself sitting across from Bruno in their apartment. Her heart pounded in her chest as she tried to find the words. She looked into his eyes, the eyes of the man she loved, the man she had built a life with, and wondered how he would react to the truth she was about to reveal. "Bruno," she began, her voice trembling, "there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago." Bruno looked at her, his expression filled with concern. "What's wrong, Alba? You've been acting strange lately. Talk to me." She took a deep breath, her hands shaking as she clasped them together. "It's about that night, the party I went to in our hometown before I moved here. I never told you what really happened." Bruno's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about? I thought you said it was just a regular party." Alba swallowed hard, feeling the lump in her throat. "It wasn't. Something terrible happened to me that night, Bruno. I was assaulted, by your friends." The room fell silent, the words hanging in the air like a dark cloud. Bruno's face went pale, his eyes wide with shock. "My friends? Alba, what are you saying?" She felt tears welling up in her eyes as she forced herself to continue. "Daniel, Miguel, Lucas, they were there. They're the ones who... I didn't realize it at first, but now I know. They're the ones who hurt me." Bruno stood up abruptly, his hands running through his hair as he paced the room. "No, that can't be right. Alba, you must be confused." "They wouldn't, I'm not confused," Alba shouted, her voice breaking. "I remember it now. I know what they did to me, and I need you to believe me." Bruno stopped in his tracks, his face a mixture of disbelief and pain. He looked at Alba, his voice barely a whisper. "You're saying my best friends did this to you?" Alba nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes. I wish it wasn't true, but it is." The room was filled with a heavy silence as Bruno tried to process the unthinkable. The truth had been laid bare, and now, there was no going back. The confrontation with Bruno left Alba feeling raw and vulnerable. The disbelief in his eyes, the hurt etched into his expression, it was a stark reminder of the gravity of her situation. The world she had carefully built with Bruno seemed to crumble around her, leaving her exposed and uncertain, but even as she grappled with the fallout of her revelation, a more chilling reality loomed over her, the identity of the fourth attacker. The piece of the puzzle that had always felt just out of reach was now surfacing with a disturbing clarity. The initial shock of discovering that Bruno's friends were involved was still fresh, but the emergence of the fourth attacker promised to unravel everything she thought she knew about that night. Alba found herself increasingly consumed by the need to understand who the fourth attacker was. The nightmares and fragmented memories had started to coalesce into a clearer picture, yet the fourth face remained stubbornly obscured. It was as though her mind was refusing to reveal this crucial detail, keeping it shrouded in darkness. She spent days poring over every memory, every detail she could recall from that fateful night. The more she tried to piece together the puzzle, the more elusive the fourth attacker became. It was frustrating and exhausting, a relentless cycle of trying to remember and coming up short. One night, as she lay in bed, she felt a surge of determination. She needed to confront the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The fourth attacker had to be someone who had been present in her life, someone she had interacted with or seen frequently. Her mind raced through the faces she had encountered in her hometown and the city, searching for any hint of recognition. In a moment of clarity, Alba recalled an encounter from months ago. She had been at a cafe with Bruno when she had seen a man who looked vaguely familiar. At the time, she had brushed it off as a trick of her memory, but now it struck her with horrifying force. The man had been in the background, someone she had seen but hadn't paid much attention to. Her heart pounded as she tried to recall more details about the man. He had been sitting at a table near them, absorbed in a conversation with a group of friends. There was something unsettling about his presence, something that had made her uneasy, but she had dismissed it as paranoia. Alba's thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. Bruno entered, his face a mask of concern. "Alba, are you all right? I'm worried about you." She forced a smile, trying to mask her distress. "I'm fine. Just thinking about everything." Bruno sat beside her on the bed. "You know you can talk to me about anything. I want to help you get through this." The sincerity in his voice made her feel guilty. She knew he was struggling to reconcile his feelings for her with the betrayal of his friends. But now, the thought of the fourth attacker loomed over her, and she had to address it. "I need to tell you something," Alba began, her voice trembling. "There's another person I think might be involved. Someone who was at the party but hasn't come up in our discussions yet." Bruno looked at her with a mix of hope and apprehension. "Who?" Alba hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I saw someone at a cafe months ago. He looked familiar, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Now I'm wondering if he might be the fourth attacker." Bruno's face turned pale. "Do you have any idea who he is?" Alba nodded slowly. "I think he might be someone connected to the group that night. I don't know for sure, but I need to find out. I need to see if he was involved." Bruno took her hand, his expression resolute. "We'll find out who he is. We'll get to the bottom of this together. The next day, Alba and Bruno set out on a quest to uncover the identity of the mysterious man. They visited the cafe where Alba had seen him, hoping that someone there might remember him or have seen him before. The cafe staff were polite but couldn't provide much information. The man had been a customer like any other, and no one recalled specific details about him. Alba's frustration grew as the search yielded little progress. She felt trapped in a cycle of doubt and fear, haunted by the face she couldn't fully remember. The sense of urgency intensified, as if the very act of uncovering the fourth attacker was crucial to her mental survival. One evening, as Alba was going through old photos from the party, she stumbled upon a picture that made her heart race. It was a group shot taken by a friend, capturing a moment of revelry before the nightmare had begun. Among the faces in the picture, she saw him, the man she had glimpsed at the cafe. He was standing in the background, his features partially obscured by the crowd. The sight of his face, even partially hidden, was a jolt to her system. Alba immediately took the photo to Bruno, her hands shaking. "Look at this," she said urgently. "This is him. I'm sure of it." Bruno examined the photo closely, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Okay, I see him. But who is he? Do you recognize him from anywhere else?" Alba shook her head. "No, I don't. But I need to find out more about him. I need to know who he is and if he was involved that night." Determined to track down the man, Bruno started investigating, using his connections and resources to dig deeper. It wasn't long before they discovered that the man was a local businessman with ties to some of the people in their hometown. As Bruno continued his search, Alba felt a growing sense of dread. Each new piece of information seemed to confirm her worst fears. The fourth attacker was not only connected to the other three but was also someone with significant influence and resources. The deeper they dug, the more dangerous the situation became. Alba felt like she was walking a tightrope, balancing between the need for answers and the fear of what those answers might reveal. The nightmare that had begun with the assault now seemed to envelop every aspect of her life, leaving her with a growing sense of foreboding. Alba knew that the discovery of the fourth attacker was just the beginning. The more she learned, the more she realized that the true extent of the betrayal was still unknown. As she faced the unfolding nightmare, she clung to the hope that uncovering the truth would bring her some semblance of closure, even as it continued to threaten her sense of security and well-being. The apartment was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft rustle of papers Alba had scattered on the dining table. Her heart felt heavy, burdened by the weight of her decision. Each moment of hesitation made the truth more difficult to face, yet she knew she couldn't delay it any longer. Bruno entered the room, his face etched with worry. Since their last discussion, he had been working tirelessly to find out more about the mysterious man Alba had identified. The tension between them had only grown, as if the air itself was charged with unspoken fears and uncertainties. "Alba, you wanted to talk." Bruno's voice was gentle, but the underlying tension was unmistakable. He could sense the gravity of the situation, and his eyes searched hers for a clue about what was coming. Alba nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them together. "Yes, Bruno. There's something I need to address. Something I can't keep inside anymore." Bruno took a seat at the table, his gaze never leaving her. What's going on? I thought we were making progress. It's not just about the fourth attacker, Alba began, her voice wavering. It's about everything, about you, your friends, and what really happened that night. Bruno's brow furrowed, and he leaned forward, his expression a mix of concern and confusion. What are you saying? Alba took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. I've been thinking about all of this, and I'm finding it hard to reconcile the fact that 3 of the attackers were your friends. It's been tearing me apart. Bruno's face paled as he processed her words. Alba, I'm trying to understand this as much as you are. I didn't know, that's the problem, Alba interrupted, her voice gaining strength. You say you didn't know, but now I'm wondering if you knew more than you let on. How could you not see the signs? How could they be so close to you and still, Alba, please, Bruno pleaded, his voice breaking. I didn't have any idea they were capable of something like this. You have to believe me. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at him. But what if you did know? What if you're just trying to protect them, even now? Bruno's face was a mask of anguish. No, Alba. I'm not protecting anyone. I'm just as shocked and horrified as you are. I've been trying to find out everything I can, but, then why haven't you found anything? Alba asked, her voice rising with frustration. Why haven't you told me everything you know? Why is it so hard to get answers? The hurt in Bruno's eyes was palpable. I've been investigating, talking to people, trying to get to the bottom of this. But everything I've learned so far has only made things more complicated. I don't know why they did what they did. Alba's gaze softened, and she reached out to take Bruno's hand. I want to believe you. I do. But the truth is, I'm scared. I don't know who to trust anymore. Bruno squeezed her hand, his eyes filled with desperation. I know this is hard, Alba. I want to be here for you, to help you through this. But you have to give me a chance to prove that I'm not hiding anything from you. The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Alba's mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts and feelings. She wanted to believe Bruno, to cling to the hope that he was on her side, but the betrayal she felt was overwhelming. The thought that the man she loved might have been complicit, even indirectly, in the horrors she endured was unbearable. I don't know if I can trust you, she finally said, her voice breaking. I don't know if I can trust anyone anymore. Bruno's face crumpled with pain. Alba, I love you. I need you to believe that I'm doing everything I can to find out the truth. Please, don't shut me out. We can get through this together. Alba looked at him, seeing the anguish in his eyes, and felt a pang of guilt. She knew how much this was costing him, but she also knew that the truth had to be faced, no matter how painful it might be. I want to try, she said quietly. I want to believe in us, but I need to see more than just words. I need to know that you're truly on my side, that you're willing to do whatever it takes to uncover the truth. Bruno nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. I will do everything, Alba. I promise. I'll prove to you that I'm with you, no matter what. The weight of the promise hung in the air between them, a fragile thread of hope amid the wreckage of their trust. Alba knew that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges and uncertainties, but she also knew that confronting Bruno was a necessary step in their journey. As the evening wore on, they sat together in silence, the space between them filled with unspoken fears and hopes. The truth was still elusive, and the road to recovery was uncertain, but for the moment, they were united by their shared commitment to facing the darkness together. The confrontation had laid bare the painful reality of their situation, but it had also opened a door to the possibility of healing. Alba and Bruno were standing on the precipice of an uncertain future, but they were determined to face it together, no matter how difficult the journey might be. Alba's resolve to uncover the truth had solidified, and with Bruno's promise to help, she set out on a new mission, to investigate her assailants and unravel the dark secrets hidden in the shadows of Bruno's past. She knew that understanding the full extent of what had happened that night was crucial, and she needed to explore every possible angle to find the answers. Her investigation began with meticulous research into the backgrounds of the 3 attackers she had identified. They were prominent figures in their own right, respected professionals, each with a public persona that masked their darker sides. Alba scoured through online records, social media profiles, and news articles, searching for any clues that might shed light on their motivations or connections. The more she delved, the more she uncovered a troubling pattern. Each of the attackers had a history of dubious behavior, including involvement in shady deals and questionable business practices. It was as if their outward success and respectability were merely a facade, hiding a world of corruption and deceit. One name in particular stood out: Lucas Reyes, a well-known real estate developer with a reputation for cutthroat tactics and a string of failed ventures behind him. His public persona as a successful businessman was at odds with the disturbing rumors surrounding his private life. Alba found reports of shady deals, questionable financial activities, and even allegations of coercion. The more she learned about him, the more she wondered about his role in the attack. The next name on her list was Victor Morales, a seemingly upstanding lawyer who had been involved in several high-profile cases. His professional reputation was impeccable, but Alba discovered unsettling details about his personal life. There were whispers of violent outbursts and a history of abusive behavior. It seemed that behind the veneer of respectability, Victor had a dark side that could explain his involvement. The 3rd attacker, Daniel Costa, was a prominent socialite known for his lavish lifestyle and connections with influential figures. His public image was one of charm and affluence, but Alba uncovered a pattern of erratic behavior and troubling associations. There were rumors of his involvement in underground circles and illicit activities that painted a grim picture of his true nature. As Alba pieced together the puzzle, she began to see a pattern. These men were not just random attackers but were linked by a network of corruption and secrecy. Their connections to one another were not immediately clear, but the web of deceit they wove was undeniable. In her search for answers, Alba also turned her attention to Bruno's past, hoping to find clues that might explain his connections to the attackers. She started by revisiting their conversations and interactions, looking for anything that might reveal hidden truths. Bruno had been open about many aspects of his life, but there were gaps that now seemed significant. Alba went through old correspondence, public records, and even spoke with mutual acquaintances. She discovered that Bruno had been involved in a number of business ventures with some of the attackers. It became evident that their relationships went beyond mere acquaintance. They had been collaborators in various shady enterprises. One evening, while going through old emails, Alba stumbled upon a series of exchanges between Bruno and Lucas Reyes. The correspondence was filled with discussions about business deals and investment opportunities, but it also hinted at a more personal connection. The language was familiar and informal, suggesting a relationship that extended beyond the professional realm. Alba's heart raced as she read through the messages, trying to piece together the significance of their content. There were references to shared experiences, mutual friends, and even veiled threats. It was clear that Bruno had been entangled in a world of deceit that connected him to the attackers in ways she had not previously understood. The revelation hit Alba hard. It was one thing to suspect that Bruno's friends were involved, but to find evidence of his direct connections to the attackers was a blow she hadn't anticipated. It raised uncomfortable questions about Bruno's role in the events of that night and whether he had been complicit in any way. Determined to confront the full extent of the truth, Alba decided to have another talk with Bruno. She needed to address the new revelations and understand his involvement in the web of deceit that had emerged. As she prepared for the conversation, Alba felt a mix of fear and resolve. She knew that uncovering the truth might lead to painful discoveries, but she also understood that it was necessary for her to move forward and find some semblance of justice. Bruno arrived at her apartment, his face a mask of exhaustion. He had been working tirelessly to help Alba with her investigation, but the strain was evident in his demeanor. When he saw the look on Alba's face, he knew that something significant had shifted. "Alba, what's wrong?" Bruno asked, his voice filled with concern. Alba took a deep breath and gestured for him to sit down. "I've been looking into your connections with the attackers, and I found some troubling things." Bruno's face went pale as he listened to Alba recount her findings. The evidence of his involvement with Lucas, Victor, and Daniel was laid bare, each detail adding weight to the accusations. "I didn't know," Bruno said quietly, his voice trembling. "I had no idea how deep the connections ran. I was trying to help you, not protect anyone." Alba's eyes were filled with a mix of sadness and anger. "But your involvement with them, didn't you ever question their actions? Didn't you ever see the warning signs?" Bruno shook his head, tears welling in his eyes. "I was blinded by the success and the money. I didn't see the full extent of their corruption until it was too late. I'm sorry, Alba. I wish I had known. I wish I could change things." Alba's heart ached as she looked at him. She saw the genuine remorse in his eyes, but the damage had been done. The connection between him and the attackers was a painful reminder of the betrayal she felt. "I need to process all of this," Alba said quietly. "I need to figure out where to go from here." Bruno nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I'll give you the space you need. I just hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me. I want to help you in any way I can." As Bruno left, Alba was left alone with her thoughts, grappling with the weight of the revelations. The shadows of the past had revealed a tangled web of lies and deceit, and she was now faced with the daunting task of finding a path forward in a world that had been upended by the truth. The investigation had uncovered unsettling connections and painful truths, but it also brought Alba one step closer to understanding the full scope of the nightmare she had endured. As she continued to unravel the darkness, she knew that confronting the shadows of the past was a necessary step toward finding justice and reclaiming her sense of self. The apartment was shrouded in an uncomfortable silence, the kind that seems to settle heavily on the shoulders of those who cannot find the words to bridge the growing chasm between them. The warm light from the lamps cast long shadows on the walls, mirroring the darkened mood that had descended over Alba and Bruno's once vibrant relationship. Alba sat on the edge of the sofa, her gaze fixed on the floor as she tried to make sense of the turmoil inside her. The revelations about Bruno's connections to the attackers had shattered her sense of security, leaving her questioning everything she had once believed to be true. The man she loved had been intertwined with those who had caused her so much pain, and the weight of this betrayal was almost unbearable. Bruno, sitting across from her, was a picture of anguish. He had tried to explain himself, to offer reassurances and apologies, but each attempt seemed to deepen the rift between them. His own feelings of guilt and helplessness were evident, but they did little to ease the storm raging inside Alba. "I don't know how we got here," Alba said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to reconcile the man I thought I knew with the one who is connected to my attackers." Bruno's face reflected the pain of his own realization. "Alba, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I didn't know the full extent of their involvement. I was trying to protect you, to help you get through this." "Protect me?" Alba repeated, her voice tinged with disbelief. "How can you protect me when you were part of the world that hurt me? How can I trust that you're telling the truth now?" Bruno's eyes were filled with tears as he reached out a trembling hand. "I understand why you're feeling this way. I know it's hard to trust me right now, but I'm asking you to believe that I had no idea. I'm trying to make things right." Alba pulled away from his touch, her face a mask of hurt and frustration. "It's not just about making things right anymore. It's about everything we had together, the trust, the love. It feels like all of it has been tainted by this." The look of despair in Bruno's eyes was almost too much to bear, but Alba couldn't ignore the gnawing sense of betrayal. The person she had thought would stand by her through thick and thin was now a source of doubt and pain. The foundation of their relationship had been shaken to its core, and she couldn't find a way to rebuild it. "I need some space," Alba said, her voice breaking. "I need to figure out if I can even trust myself right now, let alone you. I need to understand what this all means for us." Bruno nodded, his face a portrait of anguish and resignation. "I understand. I'll give you the space you need. I just hope that one day, you can find it in your heart to forgive me." As he walked to the door, he hesitated for a moment, as if hoping for a last-minute change of heart. But Alba's resolute expression told him everything he needed to know. With one last, pained glance, he left the apartment, closing the door softly behind him. The silence that followed was heavy, almost suffocating. Alba felt the weight of the room pressing down on her as she sat alone, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The love she had shared with Bruno now seemed tainted by the shadows of betrayal, and she struggled to reconcile her feelings with the reality she had come to know. Alba spent the following days in a haze of introspection, seeking solace in the routine of her daily life. She tried to avoid thinking too deeply about the situation, but the doubts and fears were relentless. Everywhere she looked, she saw reminders of the love she once had, and each memory felt like a betrayal of its own. She reached out to friends and family, seeking support and guidance, but even their reassurances did little to ease her turmoil. The betrayal had left a deep scar, and the question of whether she could ever truly trust Bruno again loomed large. One evening, as Alba sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker against the darkening sky, she found herself contemplating the nature of trust and forgiveness. The journey ahead was uncertain, and she knew that the path to healing would be fraught with challenges. But she also understood that she had to make a choice, whether to cling to the past or to forge a new path for herself. As the days turned into weeks, Alba began to make sense of her feelings and her future. The betrayal had forced her to confront difficult truths about love, trust, and forgiveness. She realized that while the past could not be undone, she had the power to shape her own future. The road to healing was still long and winding, but Alba knew that she had taken the first steps toward reclaiming her sense of self and finding her own path forward. The shadows of the past had cast their long, dark tendrils over her life, but she was determined to face them head-on and emerge stronger on the other side. As she looked out over the city she had come to love, Alba felt a renewed sense of resolve. She would confront the pain, navigate the betrayal, and ultimately find a way to rebuild her life. The journey would not be easy, but she was ready to face it with courage and determination. The city buzzed around Alba as she navigated its busy streets, her face set in a mask of determined calm. On the outside, she appeared composed, a professional woman going about her daily routine. Yet, beneath the surface, a silent battle raged within her, fueled by the lingering trauma and emotional scars from the attack. Each day was a challenge, a delicate balancing act between maintaining a semblance of normalcy and grappling with the profound impact the trauma had left on her life. She forced herself to follow her routine, going to work, meeting friends, and participating in social events. But every interaction felt like a performance, a facade she carefully maintained to mask the turmoil that churned inside her. At work, Alba's colleagues admired her resilience, unaware of the personal struggles she was enduring. She threw herself into her tasks with a dedication that bordered on obsession, using her work as a distraction from the pain. Yet, the pressure of keeping up appearances often left her exhausted, both emotionally and physically. The emotional scars were not easy to hide. Alba found herself plagued by moments of overwhelming sadness and anxiety, triggered by the slightest reminder of the attack. The once comforting routines of her daily life had become fraught with triggers that would suddenly unearth her trauma. Simple things like a crowded room or a loud noise could bring her spiraling back to the night she desperately tried to forget. Sleep, too, had become a battleground. Alba's nights were often restless, plagued by nightmares that left her waking in cold sweats. The anxiety made her fear falling asleep, knowing that the night brought with it the shadows of her past. She tried various remedies, relaxation techniques, therapy, medication, but nothing seemed to fully alleviate the weight of her insomnia. Physical scars were another reminder of her ordeal. Alba had initially avoided looking at the bruises and marks, but as they healed, she was left with a series of faint but visible reminders of the violence she had endured. The sight of her own body served as a harsh reminder of the vulnerability she had felt and the pain she had experienced. It was a constant, unwelcome intrusion into her life. Social interactions were another challenge. Alba had once thrived in the company of friends and acquaintances, but now she found herself withdrawing from social gatherings. The fear of encountering her assailants or the strain of maintaining her composure in public was overwhelming. She often turned down invitations, preferring the solitude of her apartment where she could let her guard down, if only briefly. Her relationship with Bruno, too, was a casualty of her silent struggle. Though they had agreed on some space, the emotional distance had only grown. Alba's inability to fully engage with him, combined with her constant internal battles, made communication strained and awkward. Bruno's attempts to reconnect were met with Alba's guarded responses, and their interactions often ended in misunderstandings and further isolation. Therapy sessions were a small sanctuary in Alba's tumultuous world. Her therapist, Dr. Patel, provided a safe space for her to voice her fears and frustrations. Through therapy, Alba was learning to navigate her trauma, addressing the ways it had reshaped her sense of self. Dr. Patel helped her recognize the importance of self-care and finding healthy coping mechanisms, yet, even in therapy, progress felt slow and uneven. Alba struggled with the balance between acknowledging her pain and moving forward. The path to healing was neither linear nor predictable, and each step forward seemed to be accompanied by new setbacks. Despite these challenges, Alba remained committed to her journey of recovery. She sought out support groups, connected with others who had faced similar experiences, and took part in activities that brought her solace. Slowly but surely, she began to rediscover aspects of herself that had been overshadowed by her trauma. One day, as Alba sat by the window in her favorite cafe, sipping her coffee and watching the world go by, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. The constant noise of the city provided a comforting background hum, a reminder that life continued despite her struggles. She noticed a child laughing with a parent, a couple sharing a tender moment, and felt a flicker of hope that someday, she might find her way back to a semblance of normalcy. It was a small, yet significant moment of peace. Alba recognized that while her journey was far from over, she was making progress. The silent struggle was a part of her story, but it did not define her. She was learning to navigate her pain, to accept her scars, and to find strength in her resilience. As she finished her coffee and prepared to leave, Alba took a deep breath, feeling a renewed sense of determination. The path ahead would still be filled with obstacles, but she was ready to face them with the courage and resilience she had discovered within herself. Her journey toward healing and reclaiming her sense of self was ongoing, but Alba knew that each step, no matter how small, brought her closer to a future where she could find peace and regain control of her life. The silent struggle was a testament to her strength, and she was determined to emerge from it stronger and more resilient than ever before. The city's skyline was bathed in the soft hues of dawn as Alba sat at her desk, the early morning light filtering through the blinds. The paperwork before her was a daunting testament to her resolve: legal documents, affidavits, and a stack of case files that represented her pursuit of justice. The decision to take legal action against her attackers was not one she had made lightly, but it was a path she felt she had to follow. Despite the challenges it entailed, she took a deep breath and picked up her pen, her hand trembling slightly as she began filling out the forms. The weight of the decision was palpable, and the enormity of the task ahead threatened to overwhelm her. The attackers she was up against were not just ordinary individuals, they were well-connected, influential in their circles, and shielded by layers of privilege and power. Alba had spent weeks consulting with her attorney, Sarah Morgan, a determined and experienced lawyer who specialized in cases involving assault and abuse. Sarah had been a pillar of support, guiding Alba through the complexities of the legal system and helping her prepare for the battle that lay ahead. Despite Sarah's reassurances, Alba knew that the road to justice would be fraught with obstacles. On the day of her first meeting with Sarah, Alba felt a mixture of hope and apprehension. The law office was a sleek, modern space, and Sarah greeted her with a warm, encouraging smile. "Alba, I'm glad you're here," Sarah said, motioning her to a chair. "Let's go over the strategy for moving forward. This is going to be a challenging case, but we're going to take it step by step." Alba nodded, trying to steady her nerves. "I know this won't be easy, but I need to do this. I want to hold them accountable for what they did." Sarah reviewed the case details and outlined the legal process, emphasizing the importance of gathering evidence and preparing for potential legal maneuvers from the defense. She was honest about the difficulties they might face, including the possibility of the attackers using their connections to discredit Alba or delay the proceedings. As the weeks progressed, Alba's life became a whirlwind of meetings, documentation, and interviews. She had to recount her story multiple times, each retelling a painful reminder of the trauma she had endured. The legal process was grueling, with every detail scrutinized and challenged. The attackers' defense team was formidable, employing aggressive tactics to undermine Alba's credibility. They painted her as a troublemaker, questioning her motivations and casting doubt on her testimony. The experience was disheartening, and Alba often found herself questioning whether pursuing justice was worth the emotional toll. During a particularly tough day in court, Alba sat with Sarah, who noticed her anxiety. "You're doing great, Alba. It's important to stay focused and remember why you're here. We're fighting for justice, not just for you, but for others who've suffered too." Alba nodded, drawing strength from Sarah's words. The fight for justice had become more than just a personal battle. It was about standing up against a system that often shielded the powerful from accountability. In the midst of the legal struggle, Alba found solace in her support network. Friends, family, and support groups rallied around her, providing encouragement and comfort. Their unwavering belief in her and the cause gave her the strength to persevere through the darkest moments. One evening, as Alba walked home from a particularly draining court session, she paused to take in the city's vibrant energy. Despite the difficulties, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The struggle for justice was demanding, but it also represented a chance to reclaim her sense of power and control. Alba's determination to see the case through was unwavering, even as the attackers' defense continued to throw challenges in her path. Each victory in the courtroom, no matter how small, was a testament to her resilience and a step toward holding her attackers accountable. As the trial progressed, Alba faced the realities of a legal battle against well-connected individuals. The process tested her resolve, but she remained steadfast in her pursuit of justice. The experience was a testament to her strength and courage, and while the outcome remained uncertain, She knew that she was making a difference. The path to justice was a long and arduous one, but Alba's commitment to holding her attackers accountable was unwavering. She faced each challenge with resilience, drawing strength from her support network and her own inner resolve. The battle for justice was far from over, but Alba was determined to see it through, no matter what obstacles lay ahead. In the end, Alba's journey was a testament to her strength, perseverance, and unwavering belief in the pursuit of justice. She knew that the fight was far from over, but she was prepared to face it with courage and determination, knowing that every step taken was a step toward reclaiming her sense of power and justice. The apartment was dimly lit, casting long shadows that mirrored the turmoil within Bruno. He sat alone at his kitchen table, the remnants of a late dinner left untouched. The room was cluttered with papers, legal documents, and photographs of better times, memories of a relationship that now seemed irreparably damaged. Bruno's mind was a whirlpool of conflicting emotions. The trial against his friends had exposed their involvement in the attack on Alba, and the legal battle had revealed the extent of their influence and connections. For weeks, Bruno had wrestled with an impossible choice: stay loyal to his childhood friends or stand by Alba, the woman he loved. His childhood friends, Ryan, Jake, and Tom, had been a constant in his life. They had grown up together, sharing dreams and adventures. Their bond was forged in the fires of youth, and Bruno had always considered them his closest allies. But now, their actions had caused immense harm, and their attempt to discredit Alba had made it clear that their loyalty was to themselves, not to the truth. As Bruno tried to sort through his thoughts, he received a call from Ryan. His old friend's voice was strained, a mix of desperation and anger. "Bruno, we need to talk. This whole situation is getting out of hand. You've got to help us figure this out." Bruno clenched his jaw, his inner conflict intensifying. "Ryan, I don't know what to say. I'm torn between my loyalty to you guys and my love for Alba. I never imagined things would come to this." Ryan's voice was heavy with frustration. "We're in a tight spot here, Bruno. If this goes any further, it's going to ruin us all. You're the only one who can fix this." The call ended with an uneasy silence, leaving Bruno alone with his thoughts. The pressure of the situation was mounting, and he felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. He loved Alba deeply, and her pain was a constant reminder of the consequences of his friend's actions. Yet, the prospect of severing ties with those he had known for years was a heart-wrenching dilemma. Bruno's indecision was further exacerbated by the growing distance between him and Alba. Their relationship, once filled with hope and joy, had become a battleground of trust and betrayal. Each conversation seemed to deepen the rift between them, and the emotional strain was taking its toll on both of them. One evening, as Bruno sat alone in his favorite bar, he noticed a familiar face across the room: Tom, one of his childhood friends. Tom looked weary, his face lined with stress and guilt. Bruno hesitated before approaching him, feeling a pang of nostalgia for the simpler times they had shared. "Tom," Bruno said quietly, taking a seat next to him. "We need to talk." Tom looked up, his eyes filled with resignation. "I knew you'd come around eventually. We're in a bad place, Bruno. We need to figure out a way to fix this before it's too late. Bruno's voice was tinged with frustration. How can I fix something that's already caused so much harm? I'm caught between two worlds, my love for Alba and my loyalty to you guys. What am I supposed to do? Tom sighed heavily, the weight of his own actions evident. We never wanted things to get this bad. We thought we could control it, but now it's out of hand. We need your help, but you have to make a choice. We're either going to face the consequences together or fall apart individually. The conversation left Bruno with more questions than answers. He knew that his decision would have far-reaching consequences, affecting not only his relationships but also his own sense of self. The choice between loyalty and love was tearing him apart, and he struggled to find a path forward. As the days passed, the tension between Bruno and Alba continued to escalate. Their conversations were fraught with bitterness and misunderstandings, each one a reminder of the growing chasm between them. Alba's pain was palpable, and Bruno's inability to fully commit to her only deepened her mistrust. One evening, as they sat in silence in their apartment, the weight of their unspoken words hung heavily in the air. Alba finally broke the silence, her voice trembling with emotion. Bruno, I can't keep doing this. I need to know where you stand. Are you with me, or are you going to stay with your friends? Bruno looked at her, his eyes filled with regret. Alba, this isn't easy for me. I'm trying to balance everything, but it feels like I'm failing on both fronts. I wish I had an answer, but right now, I'm lost. Alba's face reflected the pain of her decision. I can't keep waiting for you to make up your mind. I need to know if you're committed to us, or if I should move on. I deserve to be with someone who's fully in this with me. The confrontation left Bruno feeling desolate, his heart torn between the two worlds he was trying to navigate. The realization that he might lose Alba forever was a crushing blow, and he knew that the decision he made in the coming days would define his future. As Bruno faced the crossroads of his life, he knew that the choice he made would shape not only his relationship with Alba but also his own sense of identity. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, and the weight of his decision felt like a burden he could hardly bear. In the quiet moments that followed, Bruno reflected on the love he had shared with Alba and the bond he had with his friends. He knew that no matter what choice he made, it would come with its own set of consequences. The struggle to reconcile these conflicting aspects of his life was a challenge he could no longer avoid. As he faced the difficult decision before him, Bruno hoped for clarity and strength to make the choice that would bring him peace. The journey ahead was uncertain, but he was determined to find a way forward, even if it meant confronting his deepest fears and desires. The apartment felt emptier than ever, each corner a silent witness to the unraveling of Alba's world. Bruno's departure left a void that seemed to echo through the walls, a stark reminder of the trust and love that had been fractured. With Bruno now out of her life, Alba found herself facing the battle alone, her only allies the ghosts of the past and the lingering pain of betrayal. As Alba sat alone in her living room, she stared at the framed photographs of happier times, images of her and Bruno in moments of joy and connection. The reality of her situation hit her with a painful clarity. She was now fighting her battle for justice without the support of the person she had once relied on. The loneliness of her struggle was palpable, each day a reminder of how deeply her life had changed. The legal proceedings had become more intense. With Bruno's withdrawal, the attacks from the defense team grew sharper, their efforts to discredit Alba escalating. She felt the weight of their scrutiny even more acutely now, each day a relentless reminder of her isolation. The challenges of the trial seemed insurmountable, and Alba struggled to keep her focus amidst the barrage of legal maneuvers aimed at undermining her case. The night before a crucial court hearing, Alba found herself restless, unable to sleep. She roamed her apartment, the silence pressing heavily upon her. The stress of the impending hearing was compounded by the sense of abandonment she felt. Her phone buzzed occasionally with messages of support from friends and family, but their words seemed distant, unable to bridge the chasm of her loneliness. In the dim light of her kitchen, Alba reviewed her notes and legal documents, trying to prepare herself for the battle ahead. Each piece of evidence and every line of testimony felt like a small fortress she had to defend against the onslaught of the defense team. She knew that every detail was critical, and the pressure to present her case effectively weighed heavily on her. The morning of the hearing arrived with a cold, gray sky that mirrored Alba's mood. She dressed in her most professional attire, a symbol of her determination to face the day with strength. As she walked into the courthouse, she felt the eyes of the public and media on her, a constant reminder of the scrutiny she was under. The once comforting environment of the courthouse now felt hostile, each step a reminder of her solitary struggle. In the courtroom, the tension was palpable. The defense team was relentless, using every opportunity to cast doubt on Alba's testimony. They questioned her motives, suggested inconsistencies, and tried to paint her as unreliable. The barrage of questions and attacks felt like a personal assault, each one a reminder of how alone she felt in this fight. As Alba took the stand, she felt a surge of vulnerability. The courtroom seemed to close in on her, the weight of her solitude pressing down. She spoke with a mixture of resolve and fear, recounting her experience with as much clarity and honesty as she could muster. The defense team's cross-examination was grueling, but Alba stood firm, determined to hold her ground despite the overwhelming pressure. Outside the courtroom, the media frenzy was unrelenting. Alba found herself the subject of intense scrutiny, her personal life and legal battle dissected in public forums. The invasive nature of the media coverage added to her sense of isolation, making it feel as though she was facing the entire world alone. In the evenings, Alba sought solace in her support network, attending therapy sessions and connecting with friends who had offered their support. Yet, the comfort they provided was often overshadowed by the absence of Bruno, and the feeling of abandonment lingered like a shadow. During one particularly challenging evening, Alba decided to revisit the beach where she had woken up after the attack. The place that had once been a site of confusion and fear now felt like a place of reflection. She sat alone on the sand, staring out at the restless sea, and allowed herself a moment to grieve for the life she had lost and the love that had slipped through her fingers. The sound of the waves crashing against the shore was both soothing and melancholic. Alba reflected on the strength she had found within herself, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. The solitude of the beach was a stark contrast to the chaos of her court battles, and it provided a rare moment of peace amidst the turmoil. As she left the beach, Alba felt a renewed sense of determination. Despite the overwhelming odds and the pain of her solitude, she was resolute in her pursuit of justice. She knew that the fight was far from over, but she was prepared to face whatever came next with courage and resilience. In the courtroom, Alba continued to present her case with unwavering resolve. The battle for justice was a personal struggle, and each day brought new challenges. Yet, as she faced the complexities of the legal proceedings and the relentless attacks from the defense, she drew strength from her inner resolve and the support of those who stood by her. The journey ahead was uncertain, but Alba remained committed to her pursuit of justice. The struggle was deeply personal, and the fight was one she was determined to see through to the end. Alone in her fight, Alba found a new sense of strength and purpose, ready to confront the challenges ahead and reclaim her sense of justice and dignity. The courthouse was abuzz with activity as Alba arrived for another day of hearings. The legal battle had taken its toll, but she had managed to keep her composure. However, the stability she clung to was shattered by a revelation that was about to test her resolve in unimaginable ways. Alba had been piecing together fragments of her memories and clues about her attackers. The court hearings had brought some answers, but the true identity of the fourth attacker had remained elusive. The constant pressure from the defense team and the emotional strain of the trial had clouded her sense of direction. It was late in the evening when Alba received a call from Sarah Morgan, her attorney. The tone of Sarah's voice was tense, a clear indication that the conversation would be anything but routine. Alba's heart raced as she answered. "Alba, I need you to come to my office right away," Sarah said. "We've uncovered something significant, something I think you need to see in person." Alba's anxiety heightened as she made her way to Sarah's office. The familiar surroundings of the law firm felt oddly comforting in the midst of her growing dread. Sarah's office was brightly lit, but the atmosphere was heavy with anticipation. Sarah sat behind her desk, her face grim. "Sit down, Alba," Sarah said, motioning to the chair opposite her. "What I'm about to show you is something I didn't expect to find." Sarah handed Alba a manila envelope. Inside were several documents, including a photo and some investigative reports. Alba's hands trembled as she pulled out the contents. The first item was a photograph of a man with a stern expression, his identity clearly marked at the bottom: David Thorne. Alba's breath caught in her throat as she scanned the accompanying documents. David Thorne was a name she recognized. It was linked to a well-known local businessman with a reputation for influence and connections. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. David Thorne was the fourth attacker. "Are you sure about this?" Alba asked, her voice shaking. "David Thorne? But how?" Sarah nodded, her expression serious. "We've confirmed it through several sources. Thorne is connected to your case in ways we hadn't anticipated. His involvement could explain some of the difficulties we've faced in the legal proceedings." The revelation was staggering. David Thorne's connections and influence meant that he was a powerful adversary, one who could manipulate the situation to his advantage. Alba's fear was palpable as she struggled to process the information. "What does this mean for the case?" Alba asked, her mind racing. Sarah leaned forward, her tone resolute. "It means we need to be extremely cautious. Thorne's involvement suggests that there may be more at play here than we originally thought." We need to tread carefully and gather more evidence to strengthen our position. Alba's world seemed to tilt on its axis. The danger she faced was far from over, and the realization that Thorn was orchestrating events from the shadows made her feel vulnerable and exposed. The sense of security she had tried to maintain was slipping away, replaced by a growing sense of peril. As Alba left Sarah's office, the weight of the revelation pressed heavily on her shoulders. She felt as though she was walking through a maze of deceit and danger, with every turn revealing new threats. The photograph of Thorn was a stark reminder of the powerful forces working against her. In the days that followed, Alba's anxiety grew as she attempted to navigate the treacherous landscape of her legal battle. The knowledge that Thorn was a key player in her ordeal made her question everything she thought she knew about the case. She began to fear for her safety, knowing that Thorn's influence could extend far beyond the courtroom. One evening, as Alba was leaving her apartment to meet with Sarah, she noticed a shadowy figure watching her from across the street. Her heart raced as she quickened her pace, a sense of unease settling over her. The figure remained distant but seemed to be following her every move. Alba's fear was palpable as she hurried to her destination, her mind racing with thoughts of what Thorn's influence might mean for her. In a tense meeting with Sarah, they discussed the next steps in their strategy. Sarah emphasized the need for caution and secrecy, urging Alba to be vigilant and avoid any unnecessary risks. The legal team was working on gathering more evidence to counter Thorn's influence, but the process was slow and fraught with obstacles. As Alba lay in bed that night, her thoughts were consumed by the revelation about David Thorn. The danger she faced felt more real than ever, and the realization that Thorn was a powerful adversary made her feel isolated and vulnerable. The fight for justice had become a battle against not just her attackers, but a system corrupted by power and influence. Despite the overwhelming fear and uncertainty, Alba resolved to continue her fight. She knew that the path ahead was fraught with challenges, but she was determined to confront the hidden truth and hold her attackers accountable. The revelation about Thorn had deepened her resolve, fueling her determination to seek justice and reclaim her sense of safety. As the days turned into weeks, Alba remained focused on her goal, drawing strength from her inner resolve and the support of those who stood by her. The battle was far from over, but Alba faced it with a renewed sense of purpose, ready to confront the dangers that lay ahead and uncover the truth hidden in the shadows. The oppressive weight of the recent revelations had begun to lift, replaced by a steely resolve that Alba hadn't felt in months. The discovery of David Thorn's involvement had shaken her to her core, but it had also ignited a fire within her, a fire that refused to be extinguished by fear or manipulation. One morning, Alba stood by her bedroom window, watching the city below come alive. The sun's rays painted the skyline with hues of gold and pink, a stark contrast to the dark clouds that had loomed over her life. As she sipped her coffee, she felt a sense of clarity that had been missing for far too long. The time had come to take control of her narrative and reclaim her life. With newfound determination, Alba decided it was time to make a bold move. She reached for her phone and dialed Sarah Morgan's number. The call was brief but decisive. "Sarah, I need to take a more active role in this case," Alba said firmly. "I want to confront Thorn and the other attackers directly. I need to make a statement that I'm not afraid to fight back." Sarah's voice was a mix of surprise and concern. "Alba, this is a significant step. Are you sure you're ready for this?" "I am," Alba replied with unwavering conviction. "I've been letting my trauma control me for too long. It's time for me to take control of my life and stand up for myself." That afternoon, Alba and Sarah met at the law office to strategize. Sarah outlined a plan to gather additional evidence and prepare for potential confrontations. They discussed ways to ensure Alba's safety and the legal implications of her bold move. In the days that followed, Alba immersed herself in preparations. She began documenting her experiences with a newfound sense of purpose, focusing on reclaiming her narrative. She worked closely with Sarah to strengthen their case and strategize how best to confront Thorne and his associates. Alba also began to reach out to support networks, sharing her story with advocacy groups and seeking guidance on navigating the complexities of her situation. She attended support meetings, where she found solace in connecting with others who had faced similar struggles. The shared experiences and solidarity helped her rebuild her sense of self-worth and resilience. One evening, Alba received an invitation to a press conference organized by a local women's rights organization. They were planning to address issues of sexual violence and support survivors. Alba saw this as an opportunity to speak out publicly and make a statement about her own experience. At the press conference, Alba stood at the podium with a mixture of apprehension and determination. The room was filled with journalists, activists, and supporters. As she began to speak, her voice trembled slightly, but her words were powerful and clear. "My name is Alba," she began, her voice steadying. "I've been through a harrowing experience that has deeply affected my life. But I'm here today to say that I refuse to be defined by my trauma. I refuse to let fear dictate my actions. I am taking back control of my life, and I am standing up for myself and all survivors who deserve justice." The room was silent as Alba spoke, the weight of her words resonating with the audience. The support and solidarity she received were palpable, and Alba felt a sense of empowerment she hadn't felt in a long time. In the weeks that followed, the press conference had a significant impact. Public awareness of Alba's case grew, and the media coverage put additional pressure on David Thorne and his associates. The increased visibility helped to rally support from the community and brought renewed attention to the pursuit of justice. As Alba continued her fight, she found herself gaining strength from the support of those around her. The solidarity of her support network, the guidance of Sarah, and the encouragement from others who had faced similar challenges bolstered her resolve. The turning point in Alba's journey was marked by a renewed sense of agency and empowerment. She no longer felt like a passive victim but an active participant in her own recovery and quest for justice. The bold steps she took to reclaim her life were not without risk, but they were a testament to her resilience and determination. Alba's confrontation with her attackers was approaching, and with each passing day, she felt more prepared to face the challenges ahead. Her sense of control was growing stronger, and she was ready to stand up for herself and demand the justice she deserved. As she faced the next chapter of her journey, Alba did so with a renewed sense of purpose. The trauma she had endured was a part of her past, but it no longer defined her future. She was determined to move forward with strength and resolve, ready to confront whatever came next with unwavering courage. The day had finally arrived, the culmination of months of struggle, fear, and determination. Alba stood outside the courthouse, the heavy clouds above mirroring the storm brewing within her. Today, she would face David Thorne, the fourth attacker who had eluded justice for so long. The confrontation was not just a legal battle, it was a deeply personal fight to reclaim her dignity and bring closure to her torment. Sarah Morgan walked beside her, offering a reassuring presence amidst the tension. The legal team had worked tirelessly to prepare for this moment, ensuring that every piece of evidence was meticulously presented. Yet, the emotional weight of the confrontation was something that could not be fully prepared for. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Journalists, activists, and spectators filled the seats, their murmurs creating a background buzz that heightened the tension. Alba's gaze was fixed on the podium where David Thorne would soon appear. The sight of his name on the docket was a stark reminder of the personal and legal battle she was engaged in. As the court session began, David Thorne made his entrance, his demeanor calm and composed. His suit and confident stride belied the gravity of the situation. Alba's stomach churned as she watched him take his place at the defense table, a reminder of the power and influence he wielded. The judge called the court to order, and the proceedings began. Sarah presented the evidence with precision, laying out the case against Thorne and his involvement in the attack. Alba listened intently, her heart pounding as each piece of evidence was laid bare. The legal arguments were compelling, but Alba knew that the true impact of the day would come when she took the stand. When the time came for Alba to testify, she took a deep breath and walked to the witness stand. Every step felt like a mile, her resolve tested by the weight of the moment. The courtroom fell silent as she took her seat, her eyes locking onto Thorne's as she prepared to recount the details of her ordeal. Her voice trembled at first, but as she began to speak, her resolve hardened. She described the events of the party night with raw honesty, recounting the terror and violation she had endured. Thorne's gaze remained steady, but Alba could see the subtle shifts in his expression as she detailed the evidence linking him to the attack. As Alba spoke, she could feel the presence of the support network that had stood by her throughout this journey. Their encouragement and solidarity bolstered her strength, allowing her to face Thorne with a newfound courage. Her words were not just a recounting of events, they were a declaration of her resilience and refusal to be silenced. Thorne's defense team attempted to challenge Alba's credibility, their cross-examination designed to undermine her testimony. They questioned her memories, suggesting inconsistencies, and tried to paint her as unreliable. Alba held firm, answering each question with clarity and determination. The cross-examination was intense, but she remained resolute, driven by the knowledge that her fight was not just for herself, but for all survivors seeking justice. As the trial continued, the tension in the courtroom reached a fever pitch. The legal arguments and evidence presented were compelling, but the emotional weight of the confrontation was undeniable. Alba's strength and resolve shone through as she faced Thorne and his defense team, her courage a testament to her unwavering pursuit of justice. The judge's decision was met with a mixture of relief and apprehension. The verdict would determine Thorne's fate and provide a measure of closure for Alba. As the judge prepared to announce the decision, Alba's heart raced, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. When the verdict was finally delivered, the courtroom erupted into a chorus of reactions. Thorne was found guilty, a significant victory for Alba and her legal team. The judgment was a powerful statement of accountability, signaling that justice had been served. As Alba left the courtroom, she felt a profound sense of relief and accomplishment. The final confrontation had been a pivotal moment in her journey, a testament to her resilience and strength. The terror that had plagued her for so long had been confronted, and justice had prevailed. The victory was bittersweet, as it could not erase the trauma she had endured. Yet, it was a crucial step towards healing and reclaiming her sense of control. Alba's journey had been marked by immense challenges, but she had faced them with unwavering courage and determination. In the aftermath of the trial, Alba began to rebuild her life with a renewed sense of purpose. The final confrontation had been a turning point, allowing her to move forward with a sense of closure and empowerment. As she embraced the future, she did so with the knowledge that she had faced her fears head-on and emerged stronger than ever. The trial had ended, but the journey to recovery was just beginning. Alba stood outside the courthouse, the cool breeze brushing against her face as she took in the moment. David Thorne had been convicted, and justice, in some form, had been served. Yet, despite the legal victory, Alba knew that her path to healing was far from complete. The scars of that horrific night would remain, etched into her soul, but it was time to reclaim her life fully. In the weeks following the trial, Alba began to untangle the emotional knots that had held her captive for so long. She had spent months filled with anger, guilt, and self-blame, wondering if she could have done something differently that night. Now, as the reality of the court's decision settled in, she knew that the time had come to forgive herself and accept that what had happened was not her fault. Therapy became a lifeline. Alba found solace in sharing her feelings with a compassionate counselor who helped her navigate the complex emotions she had buried deep inside. With each session, Alba learned more about the trauma response, how her mind had tried to protect her by numbing certain memories, and how those repressed emotions had taken a toll on her well-being. The nightmares still came, but they were less frequent now. The vivid flashes of that night would surface from time to time, but Alba had developed coping mechanisms to manage them. Grounding exercises, meditation, and surrounding herself with supportive friends all became essential tools in her healing journey. One morning, Alba sat at her favorite coffee shop, a place she had often visited with Bruno before their lives had been torn apart. She sipped her coffee, staring out at the city bustling around her, but for once, she felt at peace. The weight on her chest had lifted slightly, and the constant sense of dread was beginning to fade. Alba had not spoken to Bruno since the trial. Their love had withered under the strain of betrayal and grief, and though it hurt, she had come to terms with the fact that their relationship was a casualty of the trauma. She realized that forgiving him, while difficult, was part of her own healing process. Not because he deserved it, but because carrying the burden of anger was only holding her back. On a warm Saturday afternoon, Alba decided to visit her childhood hometown. Returning to the place where her nightmare had begun was a daunting step, but it was also necessary. As she walked through the familiar streets, memories of simpler times flooded her mind. The laughter of her younger self echoed through the corners of the town, moments of joy that felt distant but still reachable. Alba made her way to the beach where she had woken up that terrible morning. She stood at the shoreline, the gentle waves lapping at her feet. The salty air filled her lungs, and as she looked out at the endless ocean, she felt a deep sense of release. This place, once the site of her deepest fear, now represented something new, a place of reflection and rebirth, with the wind in her hair and the vastness of the sea stretching out before her. Alba whispered to herself, "I'm free." The words carried a weight she hadn't realized was there until now. For so long, her trauma had defined her, but now she was ready to define herself beyond it. She would always carry the scars, but they no longer held the same power over her. Alba's healing journey wasn't linear, but it was hers. There were days when the weight of the past still pressed down on her, but those days were becoming fewer. She had found strength in her vulnerability, and in acknowledging the pain, she was learning to move forward. Breaking free wasn't about forgetting, it was about acceptance. Accepting that what had happened was a part of her story, but not the entirety of it. Alba had survived the darkness and emerged into the light, a woman who had faced her deepest fears and refused to be broken by them. As she left the beach that day, Alba felt lighter. The road ahead was still long, but she had taken the most important step. She had chosen to live again, not as a victim but as a survivor, strong and unafraid to embrace the future. Weeks had passed since the trial ended, and Alba had begun to find her footing again. She had reclaimed a sense of control over her life, but there were still lingering shadows, ones that kept her from feeling fully at peace. Bruno's absence weighed heavily on her heart, a constant reminder of how love could crumble in the face of betrayal. Then, one afternoon, as Alba sat in the quiet solitude of her apartment, the doorbell rang. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw who it was: Bruno, standing in the hallway, holding his breath like he was unsure of what to say or how to begin. He looked thinner, worn down by guilt, but his eyes still held the familiar warmth that had once made her feel so safe. "Alba," he started, his voice barely above a whisper, "I know I'm the last person you want to see, but I needed to come here. I needed to apologize." Alba stayed silent for a moment, taking in the weight of his words. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind countless times, what she would say if he ever came back, if he ever had the nerve to face her after everything that had happened. But now, standing in front of him, her emotions swirled into a tangled knot of hurt, anger, and residual love. "Why now, Bruno?" she asked quietly. "Why after everything?" Bruno sighed and stepped into the apartment when she gestured for him to sit. He seemed reluctant, unsure of his place in her world anymore. "I don't have an easy answer for that," he admitted. "I've spent months trying to figure out how I could have let you down like that. You deserved better from me, and I wasn't there when you needed me the most." His voice cracked with emotion, and Alba could see the sincerity in his eyes. It was true, Bruno had failed her. He had let his loyalty to his friends blind him, and in the process, he had betrayed the one person who had loved him unconditionally. But the question now was whether his remorse could ever heal the gaping wound left in the wake of his inaction. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again," Alba said, her voice steady but filled with the weight of her pain. "You weren't just absent, Bruno. You chose them. Even when you knew they had hurt me." "I didn't want to believe it," Bruno confessed, his hands clenched into fists. "I grew up with them. We were like brothers, and I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that they could have done something so terrible." But I was wrong, and I see that now. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Alba listened, her heart torn between the Bruno she had loved, the man who had once made her feel alive in the city, and the Bruno who had betrayed her trust. She had always believed that love could conquer anything, but now she wasn't sure if love was enough. I don't need your pity or your apologies, Bruno, Alba said, her voice growing firmer. What I needed was for you to stand by me when I was falling apart, and you weren't there. I can't just forget that. Bruno nodded, his face etched with regret. I don't expect you to. I just wanted you to know that I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you, even if it means never getting another chance with you. His words hung in the air between them. The love they had shared once had been pure and full of promise, but now it was fractured, almost unrecognizable. The betrayal had run deep, cutting through the foundation of trust they had built. I don't know if I can ever get past this, Alba said, her tone softer now. I don't know if we can ever go back to what we were. Bruno nodded, sadness settling in his eyes. I understand. They sat in silence for what felt like an eternity. The weight of everything unsaid pressed down on them both. It was painful to admit that love didn't always have the power to heal all wounds. Sometimes, too much damage had been done. I think we need time, Alba finally said. Maybe we'll never be the same, but I need to focus on healing myself right now. Bruno stood up, his posture resigned yet respectful. He understood that there was no immediate resolution, no quick fix for the chasm that had opened between them. He had caused her pain, and he had to live with the consequences. I'll give you all the time you need, he said softly. But if you ever want to talk, or if you need anything, I'll be here. Alba didn't respond, but she gave him a small nod as he left her apartment. When the door closed behind him, she exhaled deeply, the emotional tension draining from her body. There was no tidy ending to their story. Perhaps there never would be. Trust, once broken, was nearly impossible to rebuild, but Alba also knew that she had taken a step toward healing by acknowledging her feelings and refusing to let guilt or love blind her to the truth. She wasn't the same woman she had been before, fragile, waiting for someone to save her. She had learned to stand on her own 2 feet, to make her own choices. As she sat in the quiet of her apartment, Alba realized that rebuilding trust wasn't just about forgiving Bruno. It was about rebuilding the trust she had in herself, to believe in her strength, her resilience, and her ability to move forward, even if the road ahead was uncertain. The sun filtered through the windows of Alba's new apartment, casting warm light on the hardwood floors. It was smaller than her old place, but it felt like hers, a fresh start, untainted by memories of the past. Every morning when she opened her eyes, she reminded herself of how far she had come. It wasn't easy, but she was moving forward, step by step. Alba had left behind the bustling part of the city where she had once lived with Bruno. The memories of their love, of the life they had begun to build together, were too painful to bear in the same space. This new place, on the quieter edge of town, represented her choice to reclaim control over her own future. She wasn't defined by what had happened to her, but by how she chose to live after it. Her mornings were different now, calm and purposeful. She had begun painting again, a passion she had abandoned when life's demands took over. Alba found solace in the brushstrokes, the way colors blended together, creating something beautiful from a blank canvas. It was therapeutic, an expression of her inner world that words couldn't quite capture. Her career, too, was beginning to take shape again. Alba had taken some time off after the trial to recover, to process all that had happened, but now she was ready to return to work. She had accepted a new job, one that gave her a sense of purpose and stability. While she wasn't fully healed, she had found strength in the things she could control: her passion, her work, and the space she had created for herself. There were moments, though, when the weight of the trauma would catch her off guard. Sometimes, she would hear a song that reminded her of the night at the party, and her chest would tighten with anxiety. Other times, she would catch a glimpse of someone who resembled one of her attackers, and a cold shiver would run down her spine. But these moments no longer held power over her like they once did. Alba had learned how to manage the memories, to confront the fear and take back control. She had also found strength in a community of women, survivors like her, who understood her journey in ways no one else could. Alba began attending support group meetings, initially hesitant to share her story. But over time, she opened up. She realized that sharing her pain with others who had experienced similar traumas allowed her to release the burden she had been carrying alone. These women had become her lifeline, her source of inspiration. They helped her see that healing wasn't a destination but a journey, and that it was okay to move forward at her own pace. Bruno, too, had tried to re-enter her life, but Alba had made her choice. She understood that their love had been real, but so had the betrayal. Forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation, and she knew that moving forward required leaving the past behind. Bruno had his own path to walk, one that no longer intersected with hers. She wished him well, but she no longer needed him to heal. The court case had been exhausting, but Alba had found closure in the justice system's recognition of her truth. Her attackers had faced consequences, though it had taken a toll on her emotionally and physically. There were days when she wondered if pursuing justice had been worth the pain it dredged up, but in the end, she knew it had been the right choice for her. She had reclaimed her voice in a world that had tried to silence her. On a warm Saturday afternoon, Alba sat at a park bench, watching children run across the grass, their laughter echoing in the air. It was moments like these that reminded her how precious life was. She had survived something horrific, but she had come out on the other side stronger, more resilient. She had learned to embrace the present, to live for herself and not be defined by the past. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the landscape, Alba stood up and stretched. The horizon in front of her felt full of possibility, a new chapter waiting to be written. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she was no longer afraid of it. She had found her peace, her strength, and the will to move forward, and for the first time in a long while, she was ready to embrace whatever came next.